Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishnah's Kesubos, Perek Gimel, Chapter 3, Mishnah Gimel, Mishnah 3. Okay, now, today's Mishnah, today's day of learning is sponsored by Barry Steinberg in memory of Hyman Slavitt Chaim ben Dun HaKayin, the Neshama Shavan Aliyah. Okay. Now, the starting point of this Mishnah is the fact that when the Torah talks about a person who violated the Nara, who violated the young girl, the young girl who was a virgin, so the pasuk describes her as a Nara Basula Asher Lo Oirasa. That means a virgin Nara who was never betrothed. That is where the Torah is saying, pay the 50 shekel. Okay, that's how the Torah describes it. A Naira Psula, Asher Lo Oirasa. She was never betrothed. She never had Erusin done to her. Right? Which would imply that if she did have Erusin done to her, then what? We'll see. Okay? Now, Naira Shenis Arsa V'Nis Garsha. You have this Nara, this young girl. She had Erusin, right? She had the first part of marriage done to her. V'Nis Garsha. And then she was divorced from her husband. And then she was violated. You got the case? She's a Nara. She was Mu'reses. She had a Kedushin done to her. She was divorced, and then she was violated. Okay, so she's still a virgin, right? Because she only was married as far as Erusin. So therefore, she's still a virgin. And she would have gotten as far as Nisuin. She would have gotten as far as the Chuppah. Then she would lose her status as a Basula, as a virgin. Okay? And we're talking about that she was divorced, because if she wasn't divorced when she was violated, she was still married, right? She was Mu'resis, she had a Kedushin done to her, and when she was violated, then yesterday's Mishnah told us that he wouldn't be paying Knas, then he wouldn't be paying the fine of 50 shekel, because he committed an act of adultery that carries a death punishment, a capital punishment, a punishment by the hands of the Beis Din, of the rabbinical court. And therefore, the Mishnah is talking about that she was divorced. Okay? Now, if she was betrothed, if she had Erusin done, then she seems to be falling into what the Torah, she seems to be going against what the Torah says when it says that the 50 shekel knas, 50 shekel fine, is paid for a Nara, Basula, for a virgin Nara that was not betrothed, and she was betrothed. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Ein la knas. She doesn't have knas. There's no payment then. He's saying knas is a fine, and this fine has specific parameters. And the Torah says that we're talking about a Nara, Basula, a virgin Nara, that was not betrothed, that was never betrothed. And here she was betrothed. And therefore, she's out of the picture. She's out of what the Torah says that he has to pay 50 shekel for violating her. Rabbi Akiva says, no, yesh la knas. In this case, she does have knas. The knas is paid by the violator. Ukunasa la atzma. And in this case, who gets the knas? Not the father, but she does. In the case, so therefore, what's going on here is Rabbi Akiva says that when the pasuk says we're talking about a virgin Nara that was never betrothed, that there's a payment of knas. It doesn't mean that otherwise, if she was betrothed, there is no payment of knas, but rather, if she was never betrothed, the knas goes to the father, and if she was betrothed, the knas goes to her. And that's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. So it's a question of how, it's a question of how we are to explain the pasuk. When the pasuk tells us that one of the rules here is that we're talking about a Nara Basula, a virgin Nara that was not betrothed. Okay, which means if she was betrothed, the law is going to be different. According to Rabbi Aglili, the difference is that difference will be that if she was never betrothed, there will be a payment of knas of the 50 shekalim. If she was betrothed, there won't be the payment of knas at all. That's Rabbi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva says no. If she was never betrothed, the 50 shekel knas fine goes to the father. If she was betrothed, then that 50 shekel knas fine is going to go to her, and that's the halacha, like Rabbi Akiva. Okay, let's try to get into the next Mishnah. Mishnah Dalet, Mishnah 4. Hamafata. Now again, we've been talking about there's two cases that we're dealing with here. There's Einas and Mafata. one who violates, who rapes the girl, and the other one is mafata, he seduces her. So the Mishnah now says, going to lay out the differences between them. Because both of them, the Torah talks about, the Torah deals with paying a 50 shekel fine, and it also talks about marrying her or not. Hamafata noisein shloisha devarim. One who seduces pays for three things. There are three things he has to pay for. V'ainas arba. One who violates the girl has to pay for. Again, we're dealing both times with a nara, a girl between 12 and 12 and a half, who is a virgin. The one who seduces her pays for three things. The one who violates her pays for four things. Hamafata noisein baishes upagam uknas. The one who seduces pays for the shame he made her suffer. For what? But for seducing her. And for her, that's what it means, baishes, for her shame, upagam, and her devaluation. This will be explained further on in the parak, in the chapter, but there's a certain devaluation, a monetary devaluation that happens here to this girl, ukanas, and the 50 shkalim fine that's mentioned. Okay, so he's paying for three things. Ma'asav ala einis. There's one more when it comes to the violator. In regarding to him, there's more. Shenoisin es hatzar. He pays for tsar. Tsar means for pain, for the physical pain. There is a difference between the pain suffered by a virgin when she is violated, than what she suffers when she agrees. When she was seduced, she agreed. So there's going to be not the same pain as when she was violated. And therefore, when it comes to when he seduces her and she agreed, there is no payment for the physical pain that he caused her. While if he violated her, there is going to be a payment for the pain that he caused her. Because again, in the case of seducing her, she agreed. When she agrees, okay, she's a virgin, it's going to be a certain amount of pain. But she agreed to it. And therefore, there's no payment for that. But when she was violated, so now the suffering that she has is even greater than when she would cohabit and agree to it. And therefore, because of the extra pain that's involved when she's violated, he has to pay for her suffering. So that's one difference between the person who seduces and the person who violates. Now, the Mishnah now kind of asks the question again. Ma b'neinis l'mafata. What's the difference between one who violates and one who seduces? So again, the Mishnah repeats. The one who violates pays for the physical pain. The one who seduces doesn't pay for the physical pain. I'm going to translate literally. The violator pays immediately. That means if he violates, he pays the 50 shekel knas no matter what. Whether he lands up marrying her or not, he has to pay that 50 shekel fine, no matter what. Mamafata, but the seducer, l'chshayetzi. Literally, l'chshayetzi means when he sends her out. But in this case, it means when he decides not to marry her. If he decides not to marry her, then he pays the 50 shekel. If he decides to marry her, then he doesn't have to pay the 50 shekel. And this is all based on the words of the Torah. By the onus, by the violator, the Torah says straight out, he pays, finished. By the mafata, by the seducer, it depends whether he marries her or not. Okay? So we've got, that's one difference. The next difference is, ha'oines shaisa ba'atzitzai. The violator drinks from his pot. V'mafata and seducer, imratza lohaitzi, if he wants to send her out, maitzi, he can send her out. This means to say that the violator has to marry her. Now, if the father says, no deal, or the girl says, no deal, then he doesn't have to marry her. But, again, he has violated her, he has damaged her, and therefore the Torah says, you now have to take responsibility for her and make her your wife. So he doesn't have a choice. If they don't want, then he doesn't have to do it. They don't have to do it. But if they agree, he has to do it. That's what it means, sheisa ba'atzitza. He drinks from his pot. That means to say that even if she is repulsive, as will be explained in the next Mishnah, he still has to violated her. He has to marry her. V'mafata, and the one who seduces, if he wants to send her away, he could. Meaning, if he wants to marry her, fine. If not, not. So these are the differences between the violator and the seducer. The violator has to pay for the physical suffering, which the seducer doesn't. The violator has to pay the 50 shekel no matter what, whether he marries her or not, he has to pay for it. The seducer only pays the 50 shekel if he does not marry her. And the violator has to marry her. The seducer does not have to marry her.
Good.
Okay. Now, the third element of severity that happens when you speak rechilas about a Talmid Chacham is mitzad asibat tzemachas misipurai. What's going to develop from his story? Ki yadua hu shlo yisparal adam kol kach she'echad me'am haaretz gina oisai asa lo shum davar avla. If you tell somebody that some shmo did this to you or said this to you, okay, who cares? Big deal. But if, let's say, you hear that a Torah scholar actually said something negative about you, now the person's going to be very upset, and he's going to feel a lot of animosity towards the Talmid Chacham, because it's something that really bothers him. And it's very common that fights develop from this. And the more so, if he says about the rabbi of the city that he spoke against you, then things can really turn bad. And sometimes because of the fact that the person who was spoken about or was told that he was spoken about by the rabbi gets so upset, they could actually drive the rabbi out of town and make him lose his livelihood. So therefore, you've got a third element of the severity of speaking rechilas about a Talmid Chacham. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
What happens if